I knew what was going on was really, really wrong, but he always used to blackmail me into doing stuff I didn't want to do, like with the pictures and stuff.
In private messages over Facebook, 14-year-old Lizzy, whose name we've changed, told us she sent explicit photos of herself to her boyfriend.
I remember one night we had a massive argument. Then he messaged me on Facebook saying, yeah, we can forget all about this if you send me a picture, if you send me a naked photo. He forced me so much, proper pressure. He wouldn't talk to me if I didn't send him anything. He wouldn't talk to me for 3 days. He would just blank me.
Eventually, Lizzy's mother saw the messages and contacted police, who spoke to both teenagers and deleted the photos. Cases like Lizzy's are being reported to the police more frequently than ever before. We spoke to schools and police forces across the south to find out how it's being dealt with. Under the Freedom of Information Act, we obtained details of sexting incidents recorded by teachers, showing a sharp rise over the past academic year. Schools told us they've been confiscating and checking youngsters' phones and deleting images in front of parents and the youngsters involved. Teachers are increasingly referring incidents to police. Dorset's Safer Schools and Communities team dealt with 66 cases of sexting over the past year, nearly twice as many as the year before. They told us they've dealt with cases of pupils as young as 10, sharing explicit images of themselves or their peers.
We are seeing cases where they're being sent as a form of flirting and almost very early on in part of someone's conversation, which is really worrying because they're not understanding the potential risks around that, especially when they're sending it to someone that they don't really know that well. Those images, once they're received, are quite often then sent on to somebody else, or they're shared with other people, or quite often they're used as a way of trying to obtain further images from that young person in order so that they can then pass further images on, or simply to try and use that image as a form of blackmail to try and obtain more images of that young person.
Information we obtained from Thames Valley Police showed twice last year the force pressed charges for explicit images being shared involving teenagers aged 15 and 13. Another received a youth caution. Dorset Police says there's been concern over the sharp rise in cases being reported and has begun visiting schools to talk to pupils.
So the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what is sexting? Yes.
This school says it's taking a preventative approach.
Yep, sending rude or inappropriate text messages, I'd agree with that.
Mark Howell's been invited to deliver a presentation about sexting to Bryanston's Year 9 pupils, aged 13 and 14. They learn how quickly photos can go viral and the consequences of losing control of images online.
I didn't realise how fast pictures could get around, and it's just so easy just to click a button and they're out and you can't do anything about it.
You could probably think it's the right thing to do at the time, but then later on you'd regret it.
There could be a lot of pressure, peer pressure, or your boyfriend saying, send me this picture. But yeah, it's that one wrong decision.
I didn't realise that you could actually get prison sentences.
The NSPCC says it believes more than half of teenagers have been asked online for sexual images or videos. Popular applications like Snapchat encourage users to send a photo which appears for a few seconds on the recipient's phone. But these photos can be kept and shared. Now there's calls for internet companies themselves to take more action.
We need to make sure that parents are educated about how technology works, for schools to lay on education evenings where you have internet companies, you have mobile phone companies coming along, talking to parents and showing them what they need to watch out for.
Under the Sexual Offences Act, sharing or being in possession of an indecent image, whether or not it was sent consentingly between youngsters, is a criminal offence. But police say they want to deal with sexting by educating rather than criminalising children. But Dorset's internet safety team says we may well see more cases involving sexting ending up in court in future. Emma Vardy, BBC South Today.
Well, the Department for Education told us today that a new curriculum being brought in means children will soon be taught about staying safe online from the age of 5. Earlier I spoke to Jonathan Taylor, a former Metropolitan officer who specialised in child protection and now works as an advisor on sexting, and I asked him if enough was being done.
Not at all. A lot more could be done. This is something I've known about and the society's known about for a long time, many years, and yet we're still talking about the issues of sexting, and the only thing that's changing is the percentage of children involved is going up and the ages of children involved is coming down. A lot more should be done, not just by law enforcement, but a lot more for schools and a lot more by parents to understand the issues and what can be done to actually protect children.
Do we have to go as far as criminalisation, in the sense that you could have a 14-year-old boy, for example, doing this perhaps innocently, or at least in his head he's thinking it's innocent, and yet, you know, he could be found guilty and he could end up on the sex offenders register?
It's a good point. What we have to understand that it could be a criminal offence. The sending or creation of a sext could easily be the same definition of creating an indecent image of a child. Because of that, it must be looked at and perhaps investigated if reported, and certainly if it's reported, it must be investigated. But yeah, the Sex Offenders Act 2003, though, wasn't created to deal with young children, young adults sending of sex that, as you say, could have them arrested and at least cautioned and end up with 1 year on the sex offenders register, which is going to damage their reputation for life.
One of the things the government says is that parents should be, you know, watching for this, and they should be more technically savvy. Do you think that's sufficient?
It's not sufficient, but it's a sort of start. And what I take from that is, if you consider there's an app called Snapchat, which most parents may have heard of, a lot of their younger children and young adults will be using on the iPhone or the Android. Now, if they're using Snapchat, what they must understand is the implications if they're going to use it inappropriately, because that's what we're talking about here. It's not illegal use, it's inappropriate use. Perhaps they're taking of a self-image that they shouldn't take and shouldn't send. So parents should understand the devices that they're supplying to their children, and also the apps that are freely available to download and how they can be used.
And of course they keep changing all the time. Where does this lead?
Exactly, yeah, they will always change. We're always playing catch up. So the more awareness education that can be put into parents, schools and pupils, the better.
Jonathan Taylor, thank you. And lots of you have been commenting on this story. Just go to our Facebook page and add your comment and look at the debate.